Welcome to the studio. Thank you for joining me today. My guest today is Dr. Eyitayo Roberts-Fagite. I am so glad to have you in the studio today with me at Erkin Merino Network. We are broadcasting via YouTube. We are on Facebook, my personal page, and we're also on African Mental Health Alliance. So, welcome to the studio, Dr. Fagite.
Thank
Dr.
you,
T. You told me
Dr.
Dr.
T.
T.
Call me
Yeah,
Dr. T. That's easy, and I think that's what most people know me by. So thank you so much. It's an
yes.
honor to be on your show. I'm really glad for the opportunity to talk about something that's so dear to my heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. So, what we want to do to at the beginning is introduce you. But look, it's only on my end. It's 12:01. It's a minute past the hour. We usually give our audience time to, log on, call somebody, tell them to join the show today. We are talking about we're talking about post traumatic growth. We're talking about empowerment, transformation. What kind of woman do you want to be? What kind of girl do you want to be? What kind of man would you like to be? So this is a woman who has gone through her story of pain, a story of loss in ways that only she can really articulate. And then she's here to share how she survived and how not only surviving but thriving, how she thrived. So call somebody on YouTube, make sure you're there. On the Facebook, we need you. We need you to participate. So everybody, come on, come on, come on. I'm going to introduce my guest, and then we'll have her share her story. Dr. Eyitayo Roberts-Fagite is a physician with expertise in women's health and primary. Now, you see, when I just did that, I lost you. Sorry. So we'll start this over. I, oh, we'll have to edit that out. There you go. All right. So we'll start this introduction again. Dr. Eyitayo Roberts-Fagite is a physician with expertise in women's health and primary care research. She's a clinical lecturer at the University of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She holds membership. She holds membership of the Royal College of General Practitioner in the UK, and she's a certificate of the College of Family Physicians of Canada. She is the CEO of Chats with Dr. T, a platform aimed at promoting the health and well-being of middle-aged and older women. I love that. She is the executive director of Oasis Gifting Funds,
Foundation.
Oasis Gifting Foundation, a charity that supports the less privileged with health and educational services. She is passionate about mentoring young girls as they navigate their personal lives and professional careers. Eyitayo is intentional about using her personal story and journey to encourage African women, especially navigating life's challenges. She speaks on topics such as the social cultural beliefs and practices around marriage, divorce, abuse, single parenting, and the ability to overcome these challenges as women. She is married to Gilbert Fagite, and they have three wonderful children. Welcome, Dr. T, to the show.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate again the honor to be on this platform and to use this platform to reach out to women because, as I said, that's my passion. I'm firstly a doctor, so I'm a family doctor, and I own and run my own practice here in Canada. But I also have so many other interests, and the pandemic started 14, 15 months ago, and that made me sit down to really reconsider a few things about my life. We found that all of us had to change the ways we were doing things, and I'd always had
you.
a passion to write a book. So even though most people complained about the pandemic, I believe the pandemic gave me time to
Right.
achieve one of my life goals, which was to write a book, which is a memoir of my life story. And that
Mm.
story is actually wound around three people: myself, my mom, and my daughter, my late mom, and my daughter. So, yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here, and can't wait to get on with the show.
I love what you said. You said the pandemic gave you time to actually refocus and do something that you really wanted to do, because that is one of the things that pandemic offered all of us. We all went on a universal, international, global timeout. You
That
know,
we could do nothing about. We could do
absolutely.
absolutely nothing about it. Yeah.
We couldn't do anything about it. Somebody said God just put all of us in timeout, especially when it first happened and everybody was on lockdown. So, and you're a physician and you work with women. Your story, and you also especially said that you like to address African women, but your story is such that anybody can learn from it. You don't necessarily have to fit that particular criteria to learn from the story. Is a powerful story that you would learn. But if you are a woman out there, this especially is for you, because here's a woman who has a powerful story to share, and you will hear it as we unfold this interview. Now, we talk about our institute talks about, we're focused on trauma. We do all kinds of trauma trainings, and mental health awareness is big for us as part of our portfolio. But because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, we decided that we are going to focus on post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth as opposed to the trauma. Trauma is important because we know that, if we ask anybody to name what traumatic events are, they'll tell us it's a divorce, it's a this, it's a death, it's things that have come to strip you of your ability to move on. I always say three things about trauma: you're unprepared for it.
Mhm.
Okay, there was nothing you could have done about it because you were not expecting it, so it is unexpected. And the last thing is it completely overwhelms your ability to respond. It overwhelms your resources. It overwhelms everything. And trauma has to do with so much more than just being stressed. It impacts your fear response systems. There are hormones being secreted in your body, cortisol, that is supposed to help you, calm you so you can bear the pain. But when it becomes recurrent in too much of it, it is not good. So if we find out that sometimes you experience something at a childhood, or at a time in the past, but because you ruminate over it over and over and over, what happens is your brain doesn't know the difference between something that's imagined and something that is real. So your amygdala thinks you are still in the throes of trauma because of the rumination, because you're going through the same emotions, and so your brain thinks it's happening now. So we have women or men who have suffered things in the past and are still in traumatized state. But trauma is not a death sentence, which is why we have strategically planned our guests this month. You heard the one from last week when we talked about domestic abuse and how she overcame that. Today, we're going to look at another story, and we're going to see how she moved from surviving and now to thriving. So, Dr. T, I want you to take us through just briefly what happened first. Like, what was the traumatic events in your life? Take us through that first.
Right. Thank you so much. I wish we had the whole day, the whole month, the whole year to talk about my personal traumatic events. And I love when you talked about trauma being something that's unexpected, something that's overwhelming, and something that can really impact an individual's life for a very long time. Coming to my story, I was born into a polygamous setting. A polygamy is a practice in certain parts of the world, and definitely in the western part of Africa, where I originate from. As a young child, I was born into a home where I had my dad, and my dad had two women living in the house. One was my mother, and the other was a stepmother. My two step parents were busy doing their work. My father had to retire from work early, so he was home most of the time, but he kept himself busy playing checkers. So, as a young child, I was more or less abandoned or left to the to to the mercy of friends, house helps, neighbors. And my first experience of trauma was actually sexual molestation before I turned 10. So growing up in that environment, my stepmom and my mother definitely had to go out to fend for themselves and their children. My father was busy and was comfortable with his pension, but that exposed me to abuse. So we had a houseboy that would sexually molest me. We had male neighbors that would sexually molest me. And we came from an environment where you did not talk about it, where sometimes even when children are abused, if they spoke up about it, they were chastised for even speaking up about their experience of abuse. So that was my first one. The second one was my mother and my father ex between them had a lot of marital arguments, which escalated a lot of times into physical violence and physical abuse. So even as a young child, even though I wasn't beaten up a lot, but I witnessed on several occasions my father beat up my mother. And that was extremely traumatic because I was helpless. It was overwhelming. And I had to live through the pain of experiencing this along with the sexual abuse. A lot of details about my childhood I've shared in my book, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that later. So that was my first experience of trauma as a child. And just like Prof said, I grew up and just put this right behind me. I thought I had moved away from it, but definitely I had a lot of effects from the overdrive from my brain believing that one, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't, I felt my confidence was affected. My relationship with men was warped. It was abnormal because every man I saw my father. Every man I saw an abuser. And I went into marriage without healing from that trauma, without even talking about it. And unfortunately, my first marriage hit the rocks for reasons due to my trauma that I never dealt with. And of course, other reasons within the marriage, such as infidelity and other things that we had to deal with. That in itself was very traumatic for me. Getting married to your high school love, having a child, first time around and all that. Everything was so beautiful. It was a pastor, everything was, but I was a broken woman that hadn't received any healing from my childhood trauma. I
Yeah.
believed I took that straight into my marriage and made some decisions that, with the benefit of hindsight, I could have done better. And the other trauma definitely was the trauma of that divorce. Having to say, hey, you were a Christian, you lived your life so well, you married somebody that was an ordained pastor. How can you say your marriage breaks down? Or how can you say your marriage has broken down? That just devastated me the more. It took me almost a decade to recover from my divorce. And that was really, really traumatic for me. The other trauma I faced as an African woman was the stigma associated with that place in my life. The fact that I was divorced, I had a young daughter at the time. I had a young daughter, I had to be a single parent. I felt the stigma. I felt the looks when people would say, oh, you're a failure because your marriage didn't work out, so you're a failure. I didn't get any help apart from the support I got from my mother, who kept saying, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And yes, I believed it was going to be all right. But while I was going through that stage, it didn't feel all right. It didn't feel all right. And with the benefit of hindsight now, I went into a deep depression. I was deeply depressed and I didn't seek help for the depression. I was
Mm,
suicidal, you know, and again, my mother, she just kept, all she knew was to pray. She was my therapist. I don't think she even realized she was, you know, just kept praying for me through all those years of single parenting. And I'm glad I was able to survive that, met my husband. I'm now remarried, settled, and I'm trying to give back. So the trauma I face are actually multifaceted, but I'll just start with this. My childhood trauma, my experience of trauma between my parents, my experience of trauma in my first marriage, experiencing divorce, you know, infertility, infidelity in my first marriage, and, you know, coming through all of that to be where I am at today, to be who I'm at today, to still be standing alive today, is because eventually I was able to deal with the trauma and grow and become a better version of myself. Thank you.
wow, 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 wow. Look, you have identified some very fundamental trauma events in life. So the one of the things you talked about was, well, one of the things that we have in psychology is called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and you definitely have covered it. You said not only were you sexually molested, abused, okay, but you also experience the second hand of vicarious trauma of watching your mother being beat,
Yeah.
right? And and people don't understand the impact of childhood adverse experiences. Childhood developmental traumas are one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most egregious um, uh, traumas that could ever happen. Not that any trauma is good, but the child is not fully formed. The child is still trying to find a sense of who they are, and because the brain of a child who has been traumatized and a regular child looks completely different. It looks different. It literally shrinks your brain. It makes you who you're not. And so now you experienced all of that, like you just shared. You experienced all of that. And then, obviously, exactly what usually happens with developmental trauma. It's a gift that keeps on giving, because if you don't deal with those childhood traumas, then what happens is it gets you into another level of trauma, which becomes more complex because now you now find somebody that you love, that you care about, you get married, and what happens? The the beast from childhood comes
Comes back.
up. It comes up because it's been there all
Mhm.
this time because it was never addressed. And so that also would it impact intimacy.
Yep.
It
Yep.
impacts intimacy, sexual intimacy, or
Lots.
emotional intimacy. Because if your first experience of sex was a traumatic one, then it impacts that in later life because you're going to view that as, actually, your amygdala is going to say that's what sex is supposed to look like. And so I tell people who struggle with sexual intimacy in their marriages to sometimes, instead of just accusing each other, find out why that might be happening. Find out why that might be happening. So you are very resilient. Yeah, you are. So you went through all of that. You went through the marriage, and then you talk about stigma of divorce in especially in the Christian African community. You talked about that as if you were talking about 1990 something, but this is pretty in the 2000s, right?
Yep.
That this happened. So the following question to me is, the next question is, how did you survive? I'm not talking about thriving yet. We'll get to thriving. So the difference in just for the audience, the difference between surviving and thriving is when you say somebody is resilient, you're talking about survival. That means that they are using skills to keep themselves from drowning, to keep themselves from going under, for them to be able to go through whatever that experience is and come out on the other side. That's surviving. That's good. All right. But we go beyond survival into thriving. And that's what post-traumatic growth is about. It's about transformation. It's about that caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. So let's now go. So we're going to take those two things. So surviving that time, how did you survive? How did you cope? You talked about your mom who prayed. How else did you cope?
And she was there for me. It was more than just praying. She was my support system. She physically came to the UK. Then I was in the UK and spent time with me. She helped me with my school runs. So I had some form of support system from my mother and from a few friends at the time that felt the need to reach out and to be a part of my family, despite the persecutions from it's a silent persecution from the church. So it's not like you're not welcome to come into the church, but you will know that you're different. You will feel different. And that was not very helpful. So a few people became my support system. And I also believe that in me, I had the strength never to give up. In medicine, when we assess people with depression, even when they start to have suicidal thoughts, we ask them, we say, why will you not kill yourself? What is it that you have in life to hope for? And at the time, it was my daughter. So even though I felt things were really bad, I was terribly traumatized. My daughter had an absent father. I felt the last thing I wanted to do was to get rid of myself, kill myself, and leave my daughter orphaned, as it were, alone, or leaving her to be taken to a foster home or something like that. I didn't want that. And I'm glad I never gave up because I knew for the sake of my daughter, I should be here. And another story so close to my heart is that of a stepsister, a very wonderful lady of blessed memory, who eventually took her own life because she had depression and mental health illness. So even when I was going through all of that, I said, I don't want to be like my sister. I don't want to have to get my parents or my family to bury another child. So that
Mm,
I wasn't going to repeat that same history. And my
mm,
faith was another thing that kept me going as a Christian, as a believer. I kept hoping and trusting God for a better day. So that kind of
mm,
helped. Everything was woolly. I really didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, but I knew I just had to hang in there. And
mm,
we will come and talk about this later. I started to put myself into things that made me happy, things that I found would give me joy. I loved the academics, so I registered. I decided to pursue two master's degrees in the UK then. I instead of sitting down and feeling so down, I became more productive with my time. I decided to start exercising. I looked for like-minded women, that were professionals like me that were having a rough time, and we had like a little mini girly group, and we would meet up now and again. We'll go for short trips together, and that really helped me during those dark, very very dark days.
Wow, wow, wow. Look, this is what I tell people. There were times, look, this is why we do this work that we do, where we are bringing mental health awareness and trauma awareness to different populations. Because 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, in our communities, you find that it is, especially minority communities, that we're so close. There's such a close community. You don't air your dirty laundry. You don't go to counselor. You don't go, therapy is like a taboo and all of those things. And so what took you 10 years or 5 years to go through, you could have been able to, if you were finding somebody and you were seeing somebody that could help you through that within a few weeks, or months. It would have been so much faster. So I'm employing anybody out there who, you're going through anything. Find somebody, find a counselor, find a professional who can help you go through it. Some of the things that you have said today, support systems, anybody can do that.
Mhm.
You can find a support system. There's always somebody, Some people will say, oh, I don't know anybody, there's nobody, anybody. Look, there is always somebody. Just share, don't suffer alone. One thing trauma does is it isolates you. It isolates you. So try not to be isolated and reach out, even if it's one person that you can talk to. So share your story with somebody that you're close to. Share your story. This you talked about hoping and trusting. Anytime you have hope, there is a future. When you lose hope, then you're in the pits of dark. So you talked about becoming more productive, having something to hope, having something to hope for. That was when you started applying and decided you were going to do your master's, but also your daughter was another reason why you were like, oh, this is not going to happen, right? This I'm not about to live this life like this because I have this girl who's looking up to me. So, which means if you don't do it for yourself, if you don't get the healing for yourself, get it for your progeny. It's not their fault that they were here. You brought them here. In fact, if parents understood what adverse childhood, how significant adverse childhood trauma is, they would change things immediately. Because the trauma that you as a parent don't deal with, you're going to pass it on to your children. They are going to end up dealing with it anyway, in one way. So I
And
know that.
just something quick on the ACEs, the
Yeah,
Advanced Childhood Experience. It's a tool I use a lot in my practice as well. And it's not just about the development of mental illnesses like depression and anxiety. It's also
absolutely.
physical problems. You talked about,
Absolutely.
the cortisol, the adrenaline, all that high hormone drive sometimes causes what we call vasoconstriction of our
Mm,
lymph arteries. So even the childhood experiences that are adverse over time could lead to things like high blood pressure, could lead to
absolutely.
things like coronary artery disease, could actually increase one's mortality. So if and your lifetime expectancy was like 75 or 80, you may die sooner than that. And this is backed by research
Absolutely.
because of all the adverse childhood experiences that haven't been dealt with. So it's really important not just to look at it from a mental aspect, but also from a physical point of view, that
Yeah,
there are consequences to
absolutely.
not dealing with traumatic events
Oh
in
my
whatever
God. Yeah.
shape or form. Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you've said, it is not just mental health, it impacts your physical health, right? But it also impacts the type of job you're going to do, how well you're going to stay at going to be at that job. It impacts who is going to get raped, who is not going to get raped. All of this, there's just a correlation with so many things. And then, like you rightly said, it reduces your life expectancy. It reduces life expectancy. So this is so egregious, people. If you learn nothing from today, take that with you. Adverse childhood experiences become complex trauma anyway. They will eventually lead to a complex trauma where one trauma is leading to another, to another, to another. And then you're like, how am I going to get from under the weight of this? So what some things you're experiencing now as a child, I mean, as an adult, actually has precedence all the way, or the foundation all the way in your childhood. The wounded child. So we have the wounded child, and then you have the adaptive child who tries to protect the wounded child. And you have an adult whose real person never shows up. We want every woman, every man to come out of the shadows. That is why we're doing this. Come out of the shadows, become who you were birthed to become, and that would work. All right. So let me talk about how did you so you say you did the two masters,
Yeah.
and then what?
Right. So I did the two masters. I finished my residency training in the UK. And yeah, I did excellently. I got a good job, and my first marriage was over, and I believe my healing started from there. And the other thing was the challenge of single parenting. And again, that's another stigmatized situation in our culture. And whether you're a female or male single parent, it comes with its own challenges. And I just want to use this platform to encourage you that it's not the end of the world. You know, people get raped and get pregnant and have to raise their children. And I'm so glad that I didn't make the fact that my daughter didn't have a present father to train her differently or to spoil her or not to ensure that she still had boundaries. So I had to make her work hard, even as a little child. We were just discussing before we came live on air. She just graduated with 2 degrees from a university at the age of 20 with very good scores. You know, she got into uni at 15. And because I didn't make her feel stigmatized that, your dad is not around, oh, miserable you, miserable me. No, we walked it together. We're like, this is the situation. You're going to be okay. God is your father. I love you. You have all these aunties and uncles around you, and you can still be your best. And I'm so grateful that she took all that on and she's the better for it today. So just to encourage every single mom and dad out there, that can also be a traumatic event, but never give up. Keep loving your children and make sure that they grow up to be the best that they can.
Well, let me press you on that a little bit. You said something. You said that you surrounded them with aunts and uncles, so you had a tribe around her too.
Yes,
Yes, I think, because I think that's important. I don't think it's not just single parents. I don't think any parent, either single or the two-parent family, should parent in isolation, because it's communities. We're all part of this tribe. Whatever we don't have in our home, we can bring somebody in there who can help us thrive. But particularly for single parents, what would be your advice in terms of building this tribe around them, building this community around them? What would you do? That specifically, what are some things that can be done?
absolutely. So you need to look, you don't have to look far. Start from your own nuclear family, your siblings, a trusted friend, a first cousin, somebody that's close to you that you can trust. I wouldn't recommend, you meet a guy 2 weeks ago and you've been dating for 2 weeks and you have a 5 year old and you go, this is now your daddy or this is your uncle. No, you don't know that guy well enough. So I would encourage people to be selective about who you bring around your child. You don't want to put them in a situation where they're going to be taken undue advantage of. And I shared a lot of tips in my book about how we can make this selection the right way. It could be from a faith group, it could be from a blood relative, it could even be a co-worker who is also a good parent that you just feel, oh, can you just have a chat with my son once a week or once a month, like a mentor for that child. And that definitely helps. So we need to be wise. We need to know who we're choosing. This should be people that if we go to bed and we leave our kids with them, we'll feel that our kids are still safe with them. That's really important.
We feel that your children are safe with them. That's so important. And before we move on this children stuff, it looks like this show is like parking. It's like that's where we're going to park our cars today, because you were sexually molested at 10. Okay, by the house help. And then you said about neighbors or something like that. We grow up in this tribe settings, in Nigeria. Not necessarily, what I mean by tribe is not a village thing, but there are people around. You have the help, you have the cook, you have the chef, you have the this, you have all of this people in around you. How can parents protect their children from being sexually molested by the help, or by an uncle or an auntie or somebody there? How can we protect our children more in a communal, in communal communities? So how do settings? How do we do that?
I think the best thing to do in communal settings is to educate your child. No
Educate.
child is too young to be educated. It depends on how you present to them. And of course, for those of us in the developed world, and I'm sure even in some developing countries, sex education is part of the school curriculum. It's a good, because some parents wonder about when do I broach this with my child. So that can be a good time to broach it. That can be a good time to have that discussion with your children, to say, it doesn't matter who it is. If you're touched inappropriately, you need to let me know, and nothing is going to happen. Because what most abusers tell children is, you'll be okay if you don't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm,
Trust, this
mm-hmm.
is okay. You need to let your children know upfront that it is not okay. And then you also need to be more involved, especially when your kids are younger. These days, they don't have to go out to meet the uncle face to face. There are pedophiles online. There are
Absolutely.
people that are after children, even on the internet. So you need to know what your kids are doing, even when they're browsing, when they're watching the television, whatever it is that they're doing. Be a part of it. Be their friend so that it's easy for them to even discuss these issues with you when they do come up. So those are some of the suggestions I have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Educate your child. Tell them what the body parts are called. Like this is not. Don't give it like names. This is not. Your their breast is not a ball. I don't know. Like you give.
Always.
You call it what it is. Let them know, and let them, like you said, there should be boundaries around you. Think of this boundary. This is your space. This is your private space, and nobody should invade that. So let your children know that they're not to be invaded, and check in with them. Check in with them. Check in with them. Check in with them. Don't come from a place of trying to scare them, like, oh my God, the whole world is bad. Now, if you are a traumatized mom, that is what you're going to that's how you're going to come up at your parent at your children. You're going to like freak out, give them, all men are bad and all of women are horrible. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about grooming your children so that they live from the best of themselves and not the worst of themselves. So educate, like you said, be present, and be aware of what they're doing online. Because let me tell you, Dr. T, I was floored one day years ago when I brought in a tech guy to who works with um, children who have either run away from home or been sexually abused or things like that. And he found that, and he was telling us sites that the sites that these abusers visit and children go, and games, video games. So apparently there are video games where you can go to different levels, and there's also like private rooms in some of these video games. And yes, and you just bought the video game to your child for your child that has a potential to actually get them sexually kidnapped or in some kind of way. And so they will go to these private chat rooms because they've been playing games with this anonymous person, and then they go to the private rooms, they get to know each other, so they think they're familiar. And then the thing is, oh, when can we meet? Oh, we can. Oh, yeah, we can meet at this time. And they don't tell you. Don't tell you because this is somebody they're trying to meet. And this is how a lot of these girls are sexually trafficked. So you have girls from 10, 11, 12 years old who are being sexually trafficked from video games. And he was telling us that we wouldn't believe how many children would just share everything. They share everything on online. So we as parents, so I remember coming home that day and I just told all my children, give me your cell phones. Let me see where you're going, and I found one of those sites on one of my kids' thing, and in it was very innocent. That all the children were using. I said, delete. She was like, Mom, there's nothing. I said, delete it. Look, like this is what they do with this. We have to educate our children. We cannot be um, parents that are hands off. Neither do you want to. You don't want to be a helicopter mom hovering either, right? You don't want to do that. So apart from that, when we talk about the child, so thank you for sharing with us about the single woman getting support, the children, how to protect your children from sexual perverts, and during growing up. Now, how about thriving? How did you come into your own and just, decided, okay, done. This is who I am now. I am not this abused woman. I am Dr. T, and I am here to stay, and I am here to help you. So tell us how that went, how that came about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yes, this is the icing on the cake. It came to a point in my life where I just felt enough. And oftentimes, when you're down in the dumps, you can be there, but you don't want to stay there. You want to get out of the dumps. And that was the first step for me. I acknowledge the fact that, yeah, the last few years haven't been too good. I was abused. I have a lost marriage. I'm a divorcee. I'm a single parent, but those are all labels. That's not who I am. I decided to look at what's good about me. And I said to myself, you're beautiful. You're intelligent. You're creative. You're a child of God. You're a beautiful mother. So, some positive affirmations about myself. I spoke to a counselor. I came to understand a few more things about my dynamics. Even as a child, I went to a boarding school. So, technically, left home at the age of 12, you know, and straight from secondary school or high school to university. I only went home for holidays. So, I was more or less independent at that young age. So I came to accept my story and my journey. So once I got to that point of acceptance and I'd completed what we call the grief cycle, nobody died, but still, a divorce is still a loss. Having to bring up your child alone is still a loss because there's no father figure. you know, Being traumatized is still a loss because I was stripped of my innocence at a young age. All of that, I came around the anger, the feeling sorry for me, the low mood, the depression. I came to accept that this is my reality, but I refuse to let that reality define me going forward. And therefore, as I said, I make time to grow. I make time to date again. I make time to go out. I make time to do things I love. I make time to go on vacations. I make time to exercise, to go to the spa, to all those things I had deprived myself of for so many years. I took time for me. So what I would do is get my daughter over the summer, take her to the airport, pay a little extra, get her on the plane for the hostesses to take care of her, fly her to Nigeria to be with my family, and I'll have 6 full weeks of summer to be myself, to go out with my friends, to go on dates, to go and dance, to do all those things I love. And I started to grow. I changed my wardrobe, because sometimes it can be so depressing that even when you work hard, you have the money, you have your savings, you don't even spend anything on yourself because someone out there has called you a name or put a label on you. You don't feel
Mm,
good enough. So it's getting to that point where I've said, what I've been through doesn't define me. If you look at me today, I don't look at like what I've been through. And that's
mm,
be the first stage, accepting what you've been through, getting therapy if needed, and stepping out to the new you. Because there's
mm,
a whole world, there's a whole life ahead of you that you can enjoy. I wrote a book in the process. I moved from England to Canada. I was a single mom all this while. But you know what? I was like, what's worth doing is worth doing. Even if I'm afraid, I'll do it. If I fail, well, that's better than saying, oh, how I wish I had done this. So I don't want to live a life of regrets, and I have no regrets for making that decision. And I can say I've just been thriving since then, and
Oh,
really in a good place. God
oh
is good.
my gosh. I love it. I love it. You just like, look, I made time for me. But the first thing that we just need to pause on this and just soak it in, meditate on it. And you said accept it all as part of you. Accept it all. The reason why you have to accept everything is because then it comes into your level of influence. This is all of me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Accept it all. And then you said, get some help if you need it, get some therapy. But you said, then do you. You didn't say do you, but that's exactly what you did. You do you, like do you. So basically, you said you made time to grow. I made time to grow. Make time for yourself. Now, some people might not be able to ship their kids up to their parents to spend 6 weeks or what. You might not be able to do that, but you can do something. You can do something. Find somebody who can babysit for or look after them for maybe an hour, so you can go get a massage, or so you can just take a walk in the park by yourself. You can find something. Don't stare at the problem 24/7 every time. You you will become part of that environment. It will stifle you. It will stifle your creativity, your productivity, and you will still be a shadow of who you are. In order for you to step out into thriving, like Dr. T has said, you have to make time to grow. You have to exercise. Exercise is key. Consistent exercise. You get all of those dopamine, serotonin, all of them, all of the good hormones are just, they're jumping because it's consistent. You feel good about yourself. It helps with the alleviate or reduce depression. So these are some of the things that you want to experience. And you said you changed your wardrobe.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
That
That's
was,
so good. Tell me about
yeah,
that.
that was cute because I needed to be a new me. I needed to rediscover myself. And I found that I had abandoned myself, as it were, because I was focusing more on the problems. I was focusing more on what people said, how people felt. And it got to us, I was like, no, enough. I want to be, and I I rebirthed myself, as it were. So
You got born
I have
again.
yeah,
You got
I
born
became
again.
yeah, I became born again, as it were. But I started to do things differently. So I looked for one of my siblings. She's nice and into fashion, and I was like, okay, come, dress me up. What should I wear? Does this suit? She says, no, that's too big. That's not nice. That's old school. That's that. I said, okay, let's do a revamp. And you know what? Doing that in itself made me feel so good about myself. It made me, I would wake up and, I used to put little post-it notes in my bathroom and I would just say, you're beautiful. Whatever,
Mm.
do it. Go get this photo shoot today. Learn to wear your makeup. Learn to wear an undergarment. Know what suits your body shape. No, and good attracts good. And then I started having suitors. Then I started saying, guys, I want to take you out on a date, or I want, because I rediscovered myself. I refused to be defined by where I had been or what I had been through. And I am
Mhm.
really, really grateful about that. So yes, and it's an ongoing process. It's not a quick fix. It's not like a light switch or an antibiotic where you say, okay, you've got a cough, take this, you're going to be 100. No,
Exactly.
it's still a journey. But I'm now walking that road with a different mindset, with a healthier mindset, with a better mindset, with a more productive mindset. I couldn't freely talk about my past until 2, 3 years ago. A lot of my friends just said, you just withdrew and we left you. But now we've all reconnected. I see myself blossoming, and it was because I chose to accept my past and to rediscover my new self. So it might not be change, getting a new wardrobe for you, but whatever that is, that's just going to bring you back, make you happy. Maybe you used to cycle and you haven't done that forever. Go get a bike, start cycling again. Used to run, you stop doing it, start running again. You love to dance, start dancing again. You love to play music, start doing that again. Whatever it is for you that gives you joy. Don't forget, they say joy does not depend on what's going on around you. It doesn't depend on the label the world has given you. Find that joy for you. And that was what I did.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Wonderful. Look, all of that is so exciting. It's invigorating. And I can hear it. I can see it. I can see the transformation in just the way you have, even narrating the story. When you got to this end part, the difference is clear, right? You can see the growth and everything. Your nucleus acumen, who is like, sometimes I always tell people it's like a thermostat, it's like on zero, and you want it to get to the on red, you want it to get to the green part, and you don't get to the green part unless you have some pleasure in life, and so these are the things. What gives you pleasure? What gives you pleasure? And it is important. You said something very briefly. You said, I used to write notes to myself, sticky notes and stuff. That's important so that you can visually see it. When somebody has gone through trauma and the sense of self is just been taken away, very low sense of self. You have to remind yourself who you are again. Who are you? People say you become something new, but I think if we really want to say it, it's becoming who you originally were. You're going back to who you were before all of the abuse, before all of the of life that happened. So remember who you are today, woman, child, man listening to us today. Remember who you are and begin to start the journey. A journey of 1,000 years will take one step. You have to start with one step at a time. So you have to just take one step in front of the other. So every day, if you can run, walk. If you can walk, crawl. If you can't crawl, scoot your bum somewhere until you get there. But you are not, this is not the end of you. This is not the trauma is not a life sentence. Trauma is not a life sentence. You can recover and get well. You can thrive. You can move beyond surviving and you can thrive. One of the things that you did this year, 2020, Dr. T, is you wrote this book. Can you share the book with us? Let us see what it is. Okay.
So this is the book. It's
What is it
called
called? Okay.
Still I Rise, a story
Mm.
of generations of victorious African women. And
Ooh.
here it talks about my story, my mother's story, my daughter's story, details of how I thrived and how I survived, and
Mm.
very useful tips for people that can also help you go if you're going through, it doesn't even have to be trauma, going through anything at all in life, how my attitude and has helped me. And it's available on Amazon. It's on Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk in Australia, worldwide. It's available. So you can also DM me. I'm on Instagram. My handle is at Dr. Fagite. I'm also on Facebook at Dr. T Fagite. So feel free to follow me. DM me if you want an autographed copy, and I'll send you one too. So yeah, it's a good book. You should get it or get it for somebody during Father's Day. That's coming up.
Oh my goodness. Three generations.
Yeah.
3 generations of African women, how they've survived, how they've thrived. That's a great book to have. And your handle is Dr. T Fagite. Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
At
Okay.
Dr. T_Fagite.
Okay. At Dr. _T_Fagite. Okay. So that is important for us to it that you wrote that book. See, I love books. I just because what you've done now, several people from generations to come are going to have access to that, right? Are going to have access to that. One of the things we need to we're going to wrap up a little. So please, everybody, get this book, get this book, get this book, and go to Amazon, any Amazon, and Still I Rise. Is that what it is? Still I Rise. Still I Rise. What's the name of blessed memory now? What's the name who has a poem? Still I Rise.
Oh, that's Maya Angelou.
Maya
And
Angelou.
that poem is actually in the book.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Book as well. I put an excerpt there. It's a beautiful, and just encouraging people, no matter what it is that you're going through, you can rise. And you will rise.
And you will rise. You will rise. So we've talked about adverse childhood experiences here today. We've talked about complex trauma that happens with that. You know, for you, it was not just a childhood sexual molestation. It was then, you know, the trauma of being in a marriage where you literally didn't even know that all of that stuff was going to come out during this marriage. We led into a divorce. You know, then we talked about, you know, the religious okay, so we'll talk with trauma that can happen in churches, just because we alienate people who are already wounded. You know, that you know, we're the only ones I know, organizations that know who shoot their wounded. I mean, they're already wounded, and then you shoot them. Exactly. You know, and so we don't want that. So we want to make sure that we are loving. So if you're a pastor, if you're in a church, and people sometimes they don't even know that they're doing this. It's very subconscious or subliminal. And so make sure that, you know, you reach out to that woman in your church or in your place, in your mosque, in wherever they are, if they have gone through a divorce. You know, a lot of churches now have divorce care. So thank God for that. You know, that you and if you don't in your church, please have one, because there are people there, life happens, there are people there who are suffering. So that would be something that we are suggesting, and we're hoping that, you know, religious places adopt. Religious divorce care is important, divorce care. And then obviously you shared about how you decided to, I'm not going to stay here. This is not going to define me. I'm going to come into my own. And not only this, you haven't even talked about the book, but you also are involved in foundations and nonprofit stuff. Tell us briefly, before we have a few minutes.
Thank you very much. So in memory of my mom, I have been doing this work for a long time. I'm a family doctor, and therefore I go back home to the underprivileged areas to give free healthcare. So I'll check blood pressures, blood sugars, and stuff like that, and give them free medication. Just to give back. And then for students in primary schools that are underprivileged, we make educational materials like exercise books. We build desks to help them if they don't have seats in class. You know, we've bought televisions, computers, and stuff like that. It's called Oasis Gifting Foundation, and more information about that can be seen on my website, which is www.drtfagite.com. So just my name, drtfagite.com, and you see a lot of information about all the other things I do. I also mentor young girls, both abroad and back home in Nigeria, and just help them navigate life. And I find that really, really empowering and really satisfying. So yeah, I have my women's talk as well on my podcast. You know, and I just talk about the health of women. As we grow older, we really go through a lot. Menopause, you know, leaky bladder, name it, I talk about it. So yeah, look up my podcast.
I hope you talk about menopause.
Menopause, yeah.
Because we will have to talk about that. It's just so that I'm so glad you're doing so much, that you're really impacting your world, and you're taking care of yourself. You look like a woman who has you have come into your own. You own your space. You are the one, the universe, the creation everybody's been waiting on. There's a scripture that says that the the earnest expectation of the creation is waiting for the manifestations of the sons of and daughters of God. And so I think we're manifesting, and you're manifesting, and the Father is proud of you. And we are proud of you, of the work that you're doing. We celebrate you. Thank you so much for coming today to share your story. What you the all of the comments that we have received are just the people are just glad you're telling the story. They're glad that you're here. They think it's so powerful. You've shared so many tips. There are many people just saying thank you and just repeating some of the things that you have said to them along the way. And hopefully they will take one or few of these things and they will use it as part of their lives. To all of our viewers across and those of you who are going to watch this later, we just want to tell you that healing is possible. Trauma is not a death sentence. You can move forward in life. You can become who you were meant to be. You can thrive. And until we see you next week, where we bring in, next week, we're going to be talking about organizational wellness. So those of you who are business owners, who are executives in your places of work, who are managers in any kind of departments, who work in any kind of institution, this is for you. It's wellness organizations in organizations. So if you're in a corporate world, this is also for you. If you're in the teachers, it's all for you. So everybody join us again next week at the same time, 12 o'clock, and 12 o'clock California time, and you can decide what time it is on your end of the world. And so thank you so much, Dr. T. It's been such a wonderful time to have you.
Thanks for the honor. My pleasure. Thank you.
You are welcome. So we are going to end